Hello, this is Pre-Algebra, or Course 3 of the Saxon Math book, Lesson 2. I think as I was looking through the lesson, if you look over the first example, first two examples, they're pretty simple about solving something, which is what we just did in yesterday's lesson, Lesson 1. And the only thing they add on to that is showing how you can then check your work. So I believe if you read through those two examples, you'll be okay and be able to solve those just fine. So we're going to kind of pick it up right on page 14, if you want to turn there in your books, at that table of properties. And you can see I've kind of already written that down some in my poor handwriting. And we're just going to kind of illustrate those and hopefully give you a few ways you can kind of remember how those properties work. The first one here you can see is the commutative property. The commutative property. And we have two different ones in your book. They separate it. So the commutative property of addition, and there's a commutative property of multiplication. So just think about the word commute. And if you think about maybe what that means, your parents a lot of times will what we call commute to work. It means they go to work and they come back. So they go the same way both ways. So notice or think about as they drive to work, they're going to see maybe a Taco Bell on the way there, and then after that they're going to see a bank. But as they go home, which would be back this direction, they'd see the bank and then Taco Bell. So think about it, it's the same thing but in a reverse order. So if we're talking about the commutative property of addition, that would say A plus B is the same thing as B plus A. If you kind of want an example of that, that would be like saying 2 plus 3, which is 5, is the same thing as 3 plus 2, which is also 5. Same idea for multiplication, except for it's going to have a multiplication sign in there. So the commutative property of multiplication says A times B is equal to B times A. So if you want to think about that, maybe 1 times 4, which is 4, is the same thing as 4 times 1. Next up, we have the associative property. If you think about the word associate, that's how I think of it, is kind of who you hang out with. Are you going to hang out with this group of people, or are you going to hang out with that group of people? So the associative property of addition is kind of who it's hanging out with. So I'm just going to write up 3 letters up here, A, B, and C. And this first one, I'm going to show that I'm going to group those two together. B is hanging out with C because they're in that set of parentheses together. However, if you solved it this other way, if A and B hung out together, you would still get the same answer. So let's kind of illustrate this here. What if it was 1 plus 2 plus 3? Think about 2 plus 3 is 5, so plus 1 more would give you 6. Would that still give you the same thing if you said 1 plus 2 plus 3? Well, yes it would, because if you added 1 plus 2, that'd give you 3. Then plus 3 more, that'd give you 6. So the associative property of addition is saying doesn't matter who they associate with, you'll still get the same answer. With multiplication, kind of same idea, except for with multiplication signs instead of addition signs there. So if you say A times B times C, that's the same thing as saying A times B times C. So maybe with some numbers, 1 times 2 times 3. Again, that would be 1 times 2 times 3. Well, 2 times 3 is 6. So it would be 1 times 6, which would give you 6. Is that really the same thing as saying 1 times 2 times 3? Or essentially, what's 1 times 2? Well, that would be 2. Then times 3, so it's 2 times 3, 6. So yes, either way, you'd get the answer of 6. The next one is the identity property. You see, I already have that written out there. Think of the word identity. It just simply means like who you are. Okay, so if you talk about this, we're talking about the identity property of addition. If you take any number, we'll call the number A for a second, and if you add 0 to that, then you'll end up back with the original number A. That 0 is going to throw a term at you, but I don't think they're wanting you to limit. Never mind. So A plus 0 is equal to A. Notice you kind of start and end with the exact same thing. Start and end with the same thing. So that's why we call it the identity property. With multiplication, it's a slight bit different because we know that if we multiply a number by 0, you end up with 0. The identity property of multiplication means if you take any number, we'll call it A, and if you multiply it by the number 1, you'll end up back with that original number, A, because we know any number times 1 gives you back to that same number. I guess I forgot to do an example there of the addition, but let's illustrate that. Let's come up with maybe a hard number, 63. 63 plus 0, well, that just comes out to be 63. Same idea there for multiplication. If I said 17 times 1, well, 17 times 1 is just simply 17. So notice you start right there and end with the same number on both of these. That's why we call it the identitive property. The last property here is the 0 property of multiplication. There is not one for addition. There's just a 0 property of multiplication. 0 property of multiplication says that if you take any number, I'll call it A, and you multiply by 0, I think you already know this one, what do you get? That is absolutely correct, you get 0. An example of that would be saying 361 times 0, you get 0. Alright, so now we're going to try these, or try using these properties just as a way to help embed them in our mind. So we're going to go there to example 3. It's in your book, but we're going to walk through it here, just kind of hopefully explaining why we did each of these steps. So our instructions say, show 2 ways to simplify this expression. Justify each step. That's the part that is kind of hard and new for this lesson, is justifying each step. Okay, so let's see if we can try this. Well, the first thing maybe that I would do if I'm following my order of operations would be to multiply that 25 times 15. 25 times 15, if you do the arithmetic there, comes out to be 375 times 4. And remember, we're wanting to justify each of these. So I guess this first one here, how did I get this first line? Well, that's simply the problem that was given to me. So I'm just going to, over here on the right, say given, because that was given to me. And here, I'm trying to think, how did I get from this first step? How did I get from this first step to the second step. Think about, what did I do? Well, I multiplied two numbers. So that's just what I'm going to say. I'm going to say multiplied, I'm going to abbreviate that, 25 and 15. So I'm just saying what I did there. Alright, my next step would be then to multiply 375 times 4. If you want to write that out, you can, or we know it's going to be 1,500. 1,500. Well, again, how to get from this step, the second step, to the third step? Well, I simply multiplied what two numbers? I simply multiplied 375 and 4. So that kind of brings us to the first end of the first part here. Because remember, it did say two ways. So here is the next way. The next way would be to use one of those properties. And you might want to do this because you realize multiplying 25 and 15 would be kind of big. So you might choose to multiply some smaller numbers first. So what we'll do is we will say 25 times 15 times 4. Well, how can we do that? Well, it's one of the properties we just talked about. That is what we call the associative property. Sorry, I was looking at the problem in the book. That's what we call the associative property of multiplication. Okay, so I just changed which ones I'm associating together. What is 15 times 4? 15, 15, 30, 60. So I'm going to have 25 times 60. What do I do to get from the second step to the third step? I simply multiplied 15 and 4. Multiply 15 and 4. Well, now what do I need to do? I need to multiply 25 and 60. 25 and 60. Since I went a little bit different route of the book, let's see if we can do that over here. 25 times 60. That's going to be 0 and 0. Right? Because 0 times 5 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. Put a 0 to hold the place value there. 6 times 5. 30. 6 times 2 would be 12, plus 3 more would be 15. So then my next answer there is going to be 1,500. How did I get there? My justification for that is just multiplying 25 and 60. And notice we did get the same answer for both of those, no matter which way we did it. And if you also notice, I did the second step there a little bit different than even what the book did. So notice there's more than 2 different ways to do that. I guess the only thing I forgot to write on here is given up here on the first one, because that one was given to me. I apologize for not writing that down. Alright, so the last thing then is just for me to assign your homework. You can go and get started on this. It starts on page 16, and we're going to do 1 through 30 all. 1 through 30 all. Okay. This covers both questions from this lesson. Those are indicated with one of these little parentheses with a 2 underneath it, meaning that's from lesson 2. And if it has a parenthesis with a 1 underneath it, means those questions will be review from lesson 1. So just kind of give you an idea on where to look if you need some extra help on that. Thank you very much, and good luck.